$2,500 for what? I barked, staring at the scarlet envelope hammered, yes, hammered, onto my front gate. It screamed at me in bold black letters, a fine from the Willow Creek Property Owners Association. They claimed I was neglecting invasive weeds on the edge of their so-called community garden. But here's the kicker. That patch of dirt wasn't theirs. It was mine. My deed, my survey, and my aerial photos said so loud and clear. Yet they'd quietly been cultivating their carrots and kale right over my boundary for years. I looked again at the notice, then out past the rusted chain-link fence to their neat rows of veggies. HOA members with sun hats and smug smiles trotted around with watering cans and trowels, acting like they owned the place. That's when it hit me. If they wanted to play dirty, I'd play smarter. I strode over to the old iron gate leading into the garden and locked it tight, not just with a chain, but with a heavy-duty padlock, fresh fencing, and 3 no trespassing signs. One stood out in bold letters. Private property. HOA access permanently revoked. By the time noon rolled around, the whole town was buzzing. When Margie Finch, the HOA president, emerged from her silver sedan and saw the gate, her jaw dropped, like she'd been caught in a cartoon trapdoor. "You can't lock us out," she screeched. I handed her the deed with a smile. "I own this land. You've been trespassing for years." She flipped through the papers, her face turning ashen. This can't be right." "Oh, it's very right," I said, nodding. As I turned toward my porch, she whipped out her phone and began snapping photos, her voice shrill. "Call the sheriff. He's blocking our land, sabotaging the community garden." Little did she know. This was only the beginning. I'm Sam Harper. I'm 48, a retired city planner who wanted a quiet life in the country. I bought this 40-acre patch on Willow Creek's edge to raise horses, tend to my bees, and finally breathe. The HOA? They hated me from day one. They didn't like my gravel driveway or my patchwork fence made from old barn wood. They hated the chickens I kept behind the barn. And when I painted the barn roof forest green instead of their approved beige, I got 3 angry letters and a color chart demanding compliance. Here's the twist. My land wasn't even officially inside the HOA boundaries. My property lines were set years before the HOA's formation, so technically none of their rules applied to me. But try telling that to Margie Finch. She's the HOA's iron fist, part-time gardener, full-time micromanager, with perfect silver hair pulled into a tight bun and a glare sharper than a pruning. Sheer. The welcome basket she brought was less about hospitality and more about control. Inside, a jar of homemade jam sat beside a thick binder of HOA rules. "We encourage voluntary compliance," she purred. "It keeps property values up." I handed the binder back. "Thanks, but I prefer to live by my own rules." That's when the letters started. Barn color violation. Unregistered livestock. Unauthorized structures. My tool shed. My chicken coop. Each time I reminded them I wasn't part of the HOA, they shrugged and said, "We'll see about that." I didn't want to fight. I kept my land tidy, cared for my animals, and even hosted local kids for horse riding lessons. But when the tire tracks appeared through the woods behind my barn, I knew something was wrong. Following the trail one morning, I discovered a sprawling community garden. 2 acres of tomatoes, squash, herbs, and even a scarecrow, right smack on my property. HOA members watered and chatted, waving cheerily as if it were their own. I brought my survey maps to Margie. She smirked. "That's been part of the garden for 6 years now. Maybe your maps are outdated." I laughed. "My maps are 3 months old." Her smile tightened. "A good neighbor wouldn't make a fuss over a few feet of dirt." That's when I realized it wasn't a mistake. It was entitlement. I watched as they built compost bins, irrigation systems, and even a tool shed on my land. Then came the fine. $2,500 for neglecting invasive weeds on my own property while they farmed it without permission. Enough was enough. I locked the gate. The next morning, a crowd gathered, shouting and shaking the fence. One guy, clutching a basket of zucchini, screamed, "You can't do this. Our crops are in there." I wasn't done yet. I sent formal cease and desist letters and filed complaints with the county. I hired a lawyer. Things escalated quickly. Horse manure appeared at my mailbox. Then my fence was slashed overnight. Motion cameras caught 3 HOA members sneaking onto my land in the dead of night. The sheriff said, "You're lucky you didn't press charges." I smiled, knowing I had to fight smarter. Margie's next move was a legal claim arguing that the HOA had adverse possession rights over the garden because they'd farmed it for 6 years. I laughed. But it wasn't a joke. Then came the fire. One night, my chicken coop was ablaze, flames licking the sky as I ran out, hose in hand, trying to save my birds. 2 hens didn't make it. The fire chief called it arson. Margie had just handed me a final warning letter. "This land dispute will cost you everything." They're at war, I thought, shaking with rage but standing firm. I reinforced my defenses and uploaded my security footage online. The story went viral. Support poured in from across the country. Legal experts, fellow landowners, even the media. A protest formed outside the HOA clubhouse. Signs read, "Hands off Sam's land," and "Private property is sacred," but the HOA didn't back down. Turns out they'd been selling the produce grown on my land at local markets, profiting while I was fighting for my home. My lawyer, April Burke, said, "You're sitting on a gold mine of counterclaims, Sam, and that's where this battle is now, me against a whole system, fighting to keep what's mine. They owe you back rent, damages, recovery costs, and if we prove the fire was connected to them—" My lawyer didn't even need to finish the sentence. The implication hung heavy in the room. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, I was trying to keep life normal. Feeding the horses, patching fences, and taking long rides along the river trail to clear my mind. Henry, my neighbor and a Vietnam vet with a passion for beekeeping, dropped by one afternoon carrying a carton of fresh honeycomb and a 12-pack of cold beer. He shook his head as he handed me a bottle. "Used to be you could just live in peace," he said. "Now everyone's got an opinion on how you mow your lawn or paint your mailbox." I chuckled. Didn't know peace required a permit. But peace was a long way off. The next morning, I woke to find a yellow bulldozer parked at the edge of my east field. "What the hell is this?" I shouted as I stormed outside. The operator shrugged, headphones around his neck, and showed me a clipboard. "HOA says this land's under development review. We're prepping for soil drainage tests." I snatched the paper and read it closely. The county seal was clearly forged. "Get off my property now, before this turns criminal." He shrugged. Again, just doing my job. I called the sheriff and the county records office immediately. Turns out the HOA had filed a bogus request claiming public interest, which let them send survey crews without my permission. But the land was mine. When the county investigator came to inspect, he blew his whistle and declared the HOA's actions illegal. "This is serious. They're in hot water." But I wasn't finished. I filed a formal motion demanding the HOA cease all farming and maintenance on my property, not just the garden plots, but every path and fence crossing my land. My attorney personally served the notice at their monthly meeting. Lorraine, the HOA president, opened the envelope and went pale. You'd think that was the end. You'd be wrong. The very next morning, my main water line was slashed. No water for the horses or dogs. The irrigation system to the paddocks was destroyed. Near the broken pipe, someone left a muddy green gardening glove embroidered with the HOA's logo. I clenched my fists, fury boiling. They weren't hiding anymore. This was sabotage. My horses stomped nervously at the empty troughs. dogs circling confused and thirsty. I rerouted water from a backup tank with PVC pipes and patched the leak. Crisis averted, but the message was clear. Back off or face more. That evening, I walked into the sheriff's office carrying the gloves sealed in a plastic bag, along with trail cam videos and a new complaint, property damage and animal endangerment. Sheriff Donnelly rubbed his temples. "Jack, this is escalating. You sure you want to take it this far?" I looked him in the eye. "They burned down my chicken coop and now cut my water. This isn't escalation, it's defense." He nodded slowly. "I'll assign a deputy, but these HOA folks, they play dirty." Back home, I uploaded the footage and photos to a Facebook group dedicated to HOA horror stories. The post exploded. People tagged news stations. 2 days later, I sat down for an interview with Action News 5. The reporter asked, "Some say you're blocking community access. How do you respond to that?" I answered firmly, "The community doesn't get to trespass, sabotage, or commit arson on private land. They've used my property for years without permission, and now they want to punish me for standing up." The story aired that night. Public opinion swung sharply in my favor, but Lorraine was furious. She called an emergency HOA meeting, and for the first time, some members pushed back. One voice shouted, "We were told he volunteered the land. My kids have been farming there." A recording leaked later where Lorraine hissed, "He's just one man. He can't stop us all." But I wasn't just one man anymore. My attorney filed a lawsuit for unlawful use of property, damages, and emotional distress, asking for $125,000. Lorraine came up my gravel driveway for the first time, slamming her car door like a thunderclap. "You're making a mistake," she spat, storming toward the porch. I stood calmly from my rocking chair. "No, I'm fixing one. You want to destroy everything we built over a patch of dirt? That dirt is mine. You've been stealing it," he has sneered. "The courts won't side with you. You're just a stubborn old rancher." I smiled. "I'm a landowner, and courts love paperwork. I have plenty." She opened her mouth to reply, but my dog Bandit barked fiercely at her feet. She flinched and muttered something about karma before storming back to her SUV. That night, I stared out across my fields under the moonlight, past the dead garden where the HOA's crops once grew. They'd stopped coming since the lawsuit, but the damage was done. Then the last blow. A formal zoning complaint from the HOA, claiming my fences and barn violated rural codes and that I was illegally running commercial ranch operations. Total nonsense. Their goal was clear: bleed me out with paperwork and loopholes. I laughed bitterly, holding the letter. What they didn't know was I'd been quietly meeting with other neighbors, the ones they bullied, and together we were ready to fight back. Neighbors like Henry, Susan, and Mark had all suffered the HOA's heavy hand. Henry's driveway was repaved without notice, then he was slapped with a $14,000 bill. Susan's garden was declared a hazard overnight. Mark faced fines for offense. He'd owned for decades. We were done taking their bullying lying down, ready to push back hard. But then the nightmare escalated. One morning I woke to find every gate on my horse stable wide open. The paddocks, the tack room, all left unlocked. My horses? Gone. I bolted barefoot across the dew-soaked grass, heart pounding like a drum. The gates swung lazily in the breeze, the stable doors stood ajar. This wasn't some random break-in. This was planned. "Blue, Bandit," I shouted, and my 2 dogs burst from the porch, noses to the ground, barking as they followed a fresh trail. Hoof prints, tire tracks, footprints, all leading toward the tree line on the west side of the ranch. Then I spotted Maple, my gentle Palomino Mare, standing nervously near the fence, pawing at the dirt. She whinnied as I approached, her eyes wide and worried. The others? B, my stallion, and the younger mares, Daisy and Ginger, nowhere to be seen. I climbed onto Maple's back, dogs racing alongside, and we plunged into the woods, across the shallow creek, through the thicket, until we reached the edge of the community garden plots. There, just beyond a half-collapsed fence, Daisy grazed nervously. Further back, tied to a tree, was B. Rope tangled tight around his legs, panic in his nostrils and eyes. Whoever did this didn't know horses well. I dismounted and gently untangled the rope, whispering calming words. It took an hour to round them all up and lead them home. My hands were scratched raw, boots soaked, but they were safe. That night, I watched security footage. At 2:46 a.m., two hooded figures moved swiftly through the shadows. One carried bolt cutters, the other a sack, probably to lure the horses. The chilling detail? One wore a jacket emblazoned with the HOA's garden logo. I burned the footage to a flash drive and called April, my lawyer. "We're pressing criminal charges," I said. "They tampered with livestock." April didn't hesitate. "Felony territory. This is beyond property disputes. It's about safety." We submitted everything: videos, photos, vet reports showing the horse's scratches and stress injuries. The sheriff's office launched a formal investigation. But I wasn't stopping there. That afternoon, I hosted a town meeting on my ranch. Hay bales formed rough seating beneath the big oak tree. I handed out lemonade and invited every landowner and rancher who'd ever been bullied by the Cedar Hills HOA. Dozens showed up, some strangers, others with their own tales of harassment. "We're not here to complain," I told them. "We're here to reclaim our rights, our land, and our peace." Heads nodded, applause rippled through the crowd. Some shouted their agreement. We formed the Landowners Defense Network. Our first mission: a joint civil lawsuit against the Cedar Hills HOA and its board, demanding justice for harassment, property damage, animal endangerment, and illegal land use. But Lorraine, the HOA president, wasn't done. That very night, a truck rolled by and dumped garbage at my gate. Broken furniture, rotting vegetables, old tires. Taped to the top was a sign: "You brought this on yourself." The next morning, as I hauled the trash into my tractor's bed, a sleek white SUV pulled up. A young woman stepped out. Sharp suit, polished, holding a black folder. "Mr. Dalton?" she asked. "Hi, I'm Jenna from the State Land Oversight Committee," the young woman said, her voice calm but serious. "We received an emergency request from the Cedar Ridge HOA to review your agricultural permits and livestock registration." I blinked, caught off guard. "Emergency review?" She nodded. "Yes. They claim you're illegally housing animals in a non-agricultural residential zone." I laughed, a deep, bitter sound. "Ma'am, this is a working ranch. That barn's been here longer than the HOA has. Zoning hasn't changed in 30 years. She smiled faintly. "I figured as much. But the inspection is mandatory." I led her to my office and laid out my zoning maps, parcel registration, and state livestock. Licenses, all perfectly in order. She nodded, impressed. "Sorry for the trouble. Honestly, they're wasting everyone's time." "Don't worry," I said. "They're about to pay for a lot more than my time." That night, just as the sun disappeared behind the hills, the power cut out. Not just the house, barn, lights, electric fence, security system, all dead. I grabbed a flashlight and headed outside. The main breaker box by the road was smashed with a hammer, wires severed. The security camera box was torn down and tossed in the ditch. They'd gone too far. Sparks flickered in the dark like angry blue snakes dancing in the dirt. I stood there, crowbar in hand, heart pounding with a mix of fear and rage. This wasn't about chickens or fences anymore. It was war. I called Sheriff Donnelly. He arrived shortly after midnight with deputies, their flashlights sweeping the scene. "That's not just vandalism," Donnelly said, holding up the smashed camera box. That's endangering livestock, and possibly human life. I told them. Everything. The escalating harassment, the fire, the sabotage. We'll open a full criminal investigation, Donnelly promised. Got backup power? I nodded. Generator in the shed. I'm wired in and ready. Good. Keep your dogs close. You're a target now. That night, I couldn't sleep. Instead, I powered the generator, rewired the cameras, and set up floodlights. Around the gate. Armed trespasser warnings went up on every fence post. Sitting on the porch with black coffee and my shotgun across my lap, I knew one thing. I was done being polite. The next morning, April, my attorney, showed up with a folder of good news. The judge granted our emergency injunction, she said, handing it over. No more HOA activity on your land, and the sheriff is enforcing it. I smiled, relief washing over me. Think this will stop them? April's smile was thin. They'll either back off or go down swinging. They chose to go down swinging. Lorraine, the HOA president, filed a countersuit accusing me of harassment and claimed my viral videos damaged their reputation. They even alleged I staged the sabotage. But we had video, photos, statements, county records, and police reports. April swiftly filed a motion to dismiss their claims as baseless. Meanwhile, I repaired fences, checked animals, and secured my power system inside a locked cage. Every night, I patrolled the land with a flashlight and a whistle. The silence was new. No more garden visitors peering over the fence. No HOA vehicles creeping down the driveway. No Lorraine with her fake smiles and color charts. For a moment, I dared to think it might be over. Then the town hall notice arrived. The HOA filed a public motion to annex a portion of my land into their jurisdiction, citing community interest boundaries and their long-standing use of the area. It was bold, shameless, illegal. The public hearing was packed. Locals, ranchers, media, and supporters holding signs, "Hands off Jack's land," and "Justice for ranchers." When my name was called, I stepped up, boots dusty and denim worn, and spoke steady and clear. I bought this land fair and square. I pay my taxes, registered my livestock, built this home with my own hands. The HOA took what wasn't theirs, and when I said no, they tried to burn, slash, and intimidate me. This isn't about gardens. This is about control, and it ends here. Applause thundered through the hall. Lorraine took the mic, barely speaking 5 words before boos drowned her out. The board voted unanimously against the annexation. Victory. Or so I thought. 3 nights later, Blue barked frantic alarms. Motion. Lights flared. I grabbed my flashlight and raced outside. Gasoline had been poured around the barn's base. A match lay on the ground, unlit. Shaking, I stared into the night. Someone had come to burn me down, to destroy everything I'd built, but they'd chickened out. I bagged the match as evidence. Sheriff Donnelly arrived minutes later, eyes grave. "We're elevating this to the state fire marshal," he said. "This is criminal, possibly felony, arson." April arrived too, silent at first, then whispered, "They want your land, or they want to break you." I looked around the ranch, my barn, my horses grazing nervously, the porch I built with my own hands, and vowed they'd get neither. "They're going to lose both," I said quietly, watching the crowd settle beneath the big oak tree for the emergency town meeting. Familiar faces mixed with new ones, farmers from neighboring counties, retirees, even a few people whose names I didn't know. The tension in the air was thick. A soft-spoken man named Gary stepped forward and cleared his throat. "I was on the HOA board 2 years ago," he said, eyes downcast. "I left because I couldn't stand what Melissa was doing. She wanted Henry's ranch, said his property was ruining the neighborhood's image. When the co-op garden started, spreading onto his land, she told us not to worry about the boundaries, said he'd give up eventually." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. She forged those land documents, Gary admitted, voice shaking. I saw her do it. I never reported it. I should have. I met his gaze. It's not too late. You can still do the right thing. He nodded firmly. I'll testify. I'll tell the whole story. That moment shifted everything. April, my attorney, submitted Gary's sworn statement as new evidence. She also filed for restraining orders against Melissa and her known allies, especially after the near arson attempt on my barn. Meanwhile, the sheriff's office identified the two masked figures caught on camera during the horse theft. One was Melissa's niece, the other her gardener, Craig Bosley. Warrants went out immediately. Then, like dominoes falling, the state revoked the HOA's permit to operate its community garden pending investigation. The gate I'd locked weeks ago became a symbol of victory. No one dared cross it. For a while, the ranch felt peaceful again. I repaired the chicken coop, replaced scorched fence posts, and fortified the barn with fire-retardant panels. Every sunrise felt like reclaiming a little more of my life. But Melissa wasn't finished. The day before our first court hearing, I received a final, chilling envelope. Inside was a typed letter, unsigned, "You've ruined a beautiful community with your stubborn pride. Enjoy your silence, Henry. You'll need it where you're going." It wasn't just a threat, it was a confession. I handed it to April and Sheriff Donnelly. "This is it," I said. "They've shown their hand." Court day arrived fast. The courtroom was packed. Supporters, HOA members, curious locals. Melissa sat stiffly, lips pressed tight like she'd bitten into something sour. Her lawyer looked uneasy, probably regretting taking the case. April opened with a powerful statement. She laid out the timeline. Unlawful use of my land, forged zoning documents, false fines, trespassing, arson, sabotage, attempted annexation, and now this anonymous threat. She played videos, presented affidavits, and called Sheriff Donnelly to the stand. When Melissa's defense began, they claimed misunderstanding, that I'd overreacted and weaponized public opinion. Then came Gary. He took the stand and told all, how Melissa pressured the board to fake maps, encouraged using my land, joked about pushing me out slowly during meetings. The courtroom was silent. Even the judge leaned forward. When it was over, the ruling was swift. Judgment awarded in full. The HOA was ordered to pay $125,000 in damages, cease all activities on or near my property, and dissolve the board pending criminal investigations. The final blow came the next day. Melissa Walsh was arrested for evidence tampering and fraud after forged property documents were found in her garden shed. The HOA was finished. My ranch was free. But just as I breathed easier, a slow-moving pickup truck rolled down the gravel road toward my gate. The window lowered. A man called out, "Mr. Sanders, I'm Agent Carson, National HOA Oversight Bureau. We need to talk." I narrowed my eyes. He stepped out, ID clipped to his collar. "We monitor HOA conduct across state lines. Your case is now a flagship example of HOA abuse." He handed me a thick folder. Reports, complaints, emails, screenshots. Melissa wasn't. Just at Cedar Hills. She'd been coaching other HOAs, teaching them to exploit zoning loopholes, file silent annexations, and push neighbors off their land. I whistled low. "Your ranch was a test run," Carson said. "When you pushed back, she panicked and made mistakes. That's why we're here." I handed the folder back, numb fingers. "What do you want from me?" "A statement, testimony. You're part of a bigger fight now." I glanced at the barn, then the grazing horses bathed in golden sunset. "All right," I said. "I'll speak." 2 weeks later, I stood before a state committee telling the story, the fines, sabotage, threats, how I nearly lost everything, because someone thought their garden was more important than a man's home. I wasn't a lawyer or politician, just a rancher with a shotgun and a shovel who stood his ground, and somehow my words mattered. The hearing made headlines. HOA policies were reviewed, some boards suspended. The Cedar Hills garden was bulldozed, the land replanted with wildflowers, and the HOA sign removed. Melissa was sentenced to probation and banned from serving on any HOA board again. Her mugshot appeared next to the headline, "The Garden Queen Who Grew Too Greedy." One afternoon, I saw her drive by in a beaten-up sedan. No pride, no glare, just tired eyes. I didn't wave. Some wars end not with battle, but silence. Peace finally returned to my ranch. The fences were mended. The barn stood stronger than ever. I adopted 2 rescue dogs, brought in 3 rescue horses. Local kids came for weekend riding lessons. My gate, always locked, always respected. Sometimes someone would stop and say, "You're that ranch guy who stood up to the HOA." I'd nod and maybe smile. "No," I'd say, "I'm just the guy who asked to be left alone," because in the end, that was all I ever wanted. A little land, a little peace, and the right to protect what's mine. So, if you're out there dealing with an HOA nightmare, whether they're nitpicking your fence color or trying to steal your land, just remember this. Stand firm. Know your rights. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is say no. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like and share this video if you believe in standing up for your land and your rights. And if you've ever dealt with a wild HOA, drop your story below. I'm reading everyone. Let's expose these HOA nightmares one tale at a time. See you in the next story.